Okay, so Kev, coming up here, Ohio State has announced that they are going to be canceling a home and home series with a big non-con opponent coming up in 2024 and 2025. Now I say big. Maybe I'm putting a little extra on there, but Washington, they have eliminated the Washington home and home series in 2024 and 2025. Now, the reason to bring this up is because not too long ago, you and I had done a cap or no cap segment where one of them was the Ohio State and Alabama matchup that is supposed to officially kick off in 2027. I said cap or no cap, there will be no Ohio State Alabama home and home series when we get to 2027 and 2028. And I said, what's the rules again? See, it's not a Friday. I'm usually conditioned for the rules of cap or no cap. But I said, no, there will be no Ohio State Alabama matchup because all of these contracts that had come into play were with the current landscape of college athletics being the current setup of the Big Ten, the SEC, Pac-12, and yada, yada. But as we talked about on yesterday's show, in 2024, officially, Texas and Oklahoma will officially join the SEC in 2024. UCLA and USC will officially become Big Ten programs in 2024. In 2024 will also be the first year of the college football playoff expanding to 12 teams. I don't think it's a coincidence that all of those major moves that have come together over the last 2 years all overlap at the very same time. I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing. I'm just saying I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it makes sense. You would be pissed if you're a Big Ten team and you get UCLA and USC, and you get those programs in, and then that money goes to the Pac-12, and then they come to you a year later and don't make it, and you lost out on that money, yada yada. So it makes sense. But with that, I do believe it's going to be so easy now for Ohio State to make the college football playoff. In fact, it's by adding more of these significant non-con opponents, in my opinion, I think it almost decreases your shot at making the playoff if you stub your toe along the way. I don't think it's necessary to put Alabama or Georgia, and I see Texas and the Notre Dames and all that. Notre Dame should stay on. It's next season. It's not going anywhere, of course, but I don't think they're necessary. I know I'm in the minority on that, but when it expands to the 12-team playoff, you don't need that, in my opinion. You're in. Ohio State, congratulations. You've punched your ticket to the playoff pretty much every year starting in 2024, so there's that. I do believe you need these heavy opponents at the 14 playoff because what it does is it gives you the benefit of the doubt. They didn't play well. They do have a loss. They have 2 losses, but keep in mind they challenged themselves in the non-con, so that's why they have that second loss that they maybe wouldn't have had they did a lighter schedule like a lot of programs do. I know Washington is not a heavy hitter, but it was a solid non-con opponent. Ohio State wiping that out. I don't think that's the first non-con home and home series we're going to see Ohio State wipe out. Whether it's Alabama or Ohio State, I could see one of those 2 teams coming to the table and just agreeing to go their separate ways with it. I think Ohio State, Texas doesn't happen in a few years. Agree or disagree, Kev? I think because of the expansion of the playoff, all these great non-con opponents for Ohio State coming up in the next 10 years, we're not going to see anymore. Texas, Alabama, at Georgia, and I think that so the Texas, Alabama, and Georgia series, I think all of those along now with Washington, which I don't put necessarily in the same category as that. I think that's just the first of many cancellations of these home and homes. What say you?
It is. Unfortunately, you're right. But it sucks for us as fans. And they and us better be glad that they're expanding the Big Ten conference to add teams like USC to it because you take a look at some of these home schedules for Ohio State, man, it's just not sexy. Like they expect people to buy season tickets or us to buy tickets on the aftermarket and pay crazy markup costs for games that just don't intrigue us. I
Yep.
mean, we get obviously either Penn State at home or Michigan at home, and then we hope for one of our other opponents to be up that year, whether it's I don't know, Minnesota's up that year or Wisconsin's up that year, whomever it is. But oh man, they're having a surprising year. This would be a good game to go to. But for the most part, it's a lot of games that are over by halftime. So that's what I do truly miss about college football, like in the late 90s and early 2000s, where you were having Ohio State play at home and home with Texas. You were having I remember Oregon when Dennis Dixon was their quarterback. They did a home and home with Michigan.
Wow, I forgot. Yeah, Dennis Dixon. How about that name?
Like that's cool. I like seeing those schools on other campuses. I like to see that. And now all we're gonna get, for lack of a better word, is a glorified scrimmage in the college football playoffs and everything like that. That's the only time you're going to see teams play out of their conference, and I don't think that's a good thing. I think that's weak. I think that truly is weak.
So in 518-1410, give us a call or text into the show, because I'm having a hard time seeing, like, so a lot of listeners, I remember when we, during the season, when we'd have the debates about whether you should expand to 6, 8, stay at 4, all the way to 12. What people kept saying is you need to expand to 12 because that's going to give us more of these great non-con opponents. And I'm like, it might force like the Iowas and the Penn States of the world to maybe put some bigger non-cons on. But I think for us as Buckeye fans, I think it does the opposite. And that's just my opinion. I'm having a hard time believing that Ohio State needs the Alabamas and the Texases and the Oregons. That's another series that I had not scrolled down all the way for. I don't think Ohio State needs those for any kind of resume building. Ohio State's always going to be given the benefit of the doubt. We talk all the time about the SEC bias, and I'm not really trying to get into that necessarily, but I shared my thoughts earlier in the year that, hey, I know everyone hates the SEC bias, but let's be clear, Ohio State operates under a very similar bias. And what I mean by that is the SEC is given the benefit of the doubt all the time because they're the SEC. Well, guess who also gets that benefit of the doubt? The Big Ten doesn't get that. I agree with you fans that say that, mainly because I don't think that they're strong enough to get that benefit of the doubt. But there is a program that gets that benefit of the doubt, and it is Ohio State. Everything that we say that the SEC gets, I do believe that Ohio State gets that same benefit of the doubt. Therefore, I don't think it's necessary. Here's the other question I have that you might be able to answer, Kev. Ohio State pays like the Youngstowns and the Western Kentuckys and the UConns of the world, Bowling Green. Alabama, Ohio State, there's what's in it for both teams outside of the tough non-con opponent for each other. Who's paying who, and is anyone paying who? I know that, by the way, Ohio State's having to pay like a nice number. I can't remember it. This screen froze on me. What they have to pay to get out of the Washington contract.
Right.
I'm assuming they're paying Washington for that. I'm not sure. I don't know what kind of team you have to be where you're not paying one or the other to play. I don't know how that works. I don't know the details.
I'm not sure how that works. I would imagine that the schools ADs work it out, because obviously if Ohio State is coming to Alabama or vice versa, they both know, like, hey, man, it's going to be a sellout. It's going to be a big media draw. Like, it's not all, you're not the only ones bringing all this attention to the game. We're going to get a sizable cut as well. So that's what I would imagine. I'm not 100% sure, but I would imagine it would be that way.
So in a statement from Ohio State Athletic Director Gene Smith, he said that his school initiated the cancellation and that they're going to be responsible for a $500,000 penalty under the terms of the contract that must be paid by February of 2025. This is his quote right here, saying that as a result of the cancellation, we will add an 8th home game for the 2024 season, affording us the opportunity to have the funding. Thank God that they found a revenue source to pay this $50,000 or $500,000, by the way. I think that's adorable. But he says, affording us the opportunity to have the funding to pay the penalty and guarantee that 8th opponent. Smith said the series had been agreed to from back in 2017. It was to see the Buckeyes visit Washington in 24, and then the Huskies traveled to the Buckeyes in 2025. He goes on to say, Gene Smith, of course, that we're very disappointed that our student athlete staff and Husky Nation won't get to experience these two games with Ohio State. I'm sorry, this is the Washington athletic director. I think it's a bigger hit for Washington than Ohio State at the end of the day. So they have to pay $500,000 to get out of that contract, but that's nothing. You see the contracts you see the money that Texas and Oklahoma are having to pay. It's $500 million or something crazy. It's a ridiculous number, but they're going to pay it because they're going to, they're going to that money will be supplemented somehow by the transition into those conferences, the TV playoff.
Yeah, and it's not like you have to cut the check tomorrow. Like, they break it down into payments. So I mean, they'll be fine paying it. My whole thing is, like, it just sucks for us fans, and this turns it more, I won't say regionalized, because conference footprints are expanding. They're going to continue to expand, but like, you're just not going to get that. The only time we're going to play Alabama is in the college football playoff. The only time that Ohio State is going to play Texas is in the college football championship games or playoffs or whatever. I just don't think that's good for the sport. I think we're even going to start venturing away from these neutral site games as well. I think those are about to go the way of Dodo Bird as well. I think we're going to get more and more of, MAC opponents and Conference USA opponents on the schedule, as opposed to playing somebody else outside of the conference. Like, that's a name brand. I don't think that's good for the sport.
All right, so Ohio State, they canceled their upcoming series. They're home and home with Washington in 2024 and 2025. Here are some of the big non-con contracts that they have as we close this out. So they'll have the return game at Notre Dame, which, by the way, I cannot wait. It's one thing I love when seeing Alabama at the shoe is cool. That would be awesome. But there's something about watching Ohio State play at various venues that you just you'd like to see them play at South Bend, to see them play at Notre Dame next year. That site is going to be so much bigger to me than when Notre Dame was at the shoe. It's just going to be so significant to me. But in 2025, Ohio State will welcome in Texas. In 2027, they'll welcome in Alabama. This chart is going in a much different direction. It's not in the order I thought it was. Sorry. So 2025 is Texas. 2026, they'll be at Texas. Alabama coming to the shoe in 2027. They'll be at Alabama in 2028. Don't forget that big one with Buffalo and Bowling Green. 2030 at Georgia. Georgia coming to the shoe in 2031. At Oregon in 32. Versus Oregon at home in 33. And then the Boston College series, which I think halfway has a lot to do with why that contract got done last year. But I don't see – I'll be surprised to see any of those still play out as we go to this 12-team playoff.
As you run down that list, what's the Ohio State, Alabama home and home again?
That is not until 2027 and 28.
I'm going back the other way. It's going to happen.
That one happens?
Neither one of these teams is going to back out of that because of ego.
Because who's going to do it?
Who's going to do it? Who's going to say they're scared to play? For Ohio State to back out of the Washington deal, it's like, whatever. I mean, no offense to the Washington Huskies, but they're not top level, brand name. Everything's on the line every single year, like it is with Ohio State and Alabama. They have good years, they have bad years. They've made the college football playoff, unlike USC. And they had a good season last year, and they're looking to win the Pac-12 this upcoming season. I think they will, actually. But that game is not until the future. But Ohio State, Alabama, you know how the boards will go crazy if Ohio State dials up Alabama and say, yeah, we're not going to play. Sorry. Don't get killed on the board. So Ohio State's not backing out. Neither is Alabama. They're going to play that game.
That's a very valid point. I don't think so. If Ohio State cancels the series with Texas, it's not because they're afraid of Texas. So I think that could exist in that too. Maybe that series happens for that very reason. But Texas isn't Alabama.
Right.
Texas isn't Georgia. I don't think Ohio State and Georgia are worried about who's going to blink first between the two, because Ohio State can look at Georgia and say, we have a longer shelf life of remaining at the top. So Georgia's hot right now, but will Georgia be hot in the next 10 years? We'll wait to cancel that one. Right. Alabama's you're pretty confident that train's going to keep rolling. So we'll see what happens there. But the Oregon series, Oregon needs Ohio State more than Ohio State needs Oregon. Oregon did beat Ohio State at the shoe the last time those two teams played.
Right.
Kinner and Kev, 1410 ESPN Radio. We'll be right back.